to thank everyone for coming. This was a huge night for us. This is by far the biggest amount of people who have ever seen the movie thus far. Maybe 10 people saw it before tonight. So I hope you liked it. I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot to take in, and I'm sure there were many moments you wanted to scream while watching it. But the purpose of this movie is to go and have discussions about it, show it to your friends, family, talk about it. If you disagree with parts of it, awesome. At least it gets you talking, hopefully.
Yay.
But I would like to open up. Would any of you guys want to say something before we open up questions?
I do. I just want to say thank you, Cassie, Jaye, for somebody finally speaking some truth.
Keeping your artistic integrity.
Yes.
Yeah, even more than, I mean, even if it had been something that wasn't as obviously pro the men's rights movement, you kept your integrity in refusing the funding and going forward with something that could have, I know the risk that is involved when you ask for money from the internet. It's a scary process. So thank you for facing that and getting through it to make this.
Thank you.
I want to say something that I realized when I was watching, that so much of what keeps us from going forward is the argument over who has it worse. And I think that argument should be classified as to be just as useless, pointless, and destructive as an argument within a family over, Mom, who do you love more, my brother or me? Just go there, we should stop going.
Possible to
Well, and the whole, I think the argument that sexism is, only happens to women is kind of ridiculous. If you're treating one sex different than you're treating the other, you're by definition treating both of them differently. You're treating both of them in a sexist manner, and but it's structural or institutional. Well, if it's part of patriarchy, or whatever system whatever you want to call the system, then it is systemic. It's systemic in both directions. It's structural in both directions. It's institutional in both directions. So we need to get away from sort of trying to define things as treating both sexes differently as something that only happens to women, because it's simultaneously happening, like, logically. You can't. That doesn't. My brain's.
Well, I've been arguing for decades that to the degree that there's a solution to this whole thing, there's no real solution to the human condition, but to the degree that there's a solution to all this, it's all about calling it even. What this film demonstrates is that for every female complaint, there's a mirror opposite male complaint. For every male complaint, there's a mirror opposite female complaint. It all balances out except for one thing. We don't believe that. Instead, we believe that men have the power and women are the victims. And everything we do to act out of that belief system is about taking power away from men. It's about punishing men, the over-empowered oppressor victimizers. It's about advantaging and protecting women more than men. And so what is basically metaphysically a balanced system becomes imbalanced because the belief system is so imbalanced.
Well, can I argue with that?
Mm-hmm.
I would actually argue that this system also is a significant detriment to women because of the overemphasis on victimhood.
Absolutely.
The worst thing you can do,
Absolutely.
the worst prison you can create is this prison of.
That's right. Just because most of the victimizations that feminism points out are bogus doesn't mean women aren't victims. It just means that the true victimization of women is something that feminism does not address because feminism is the primary perpetrator. It's all about withholding accountability. It's all about withholding respect from women. It's all about
fear-mongering.
Constantly telling women that they're the victims and filling them with all this fear and thinking that men are going to jump out of every bush to attack and rape them. And That's the true victimization of women.
And let me just say also that we have many different perspectives on these issues in the room. And what I was hoping to do with the film was to show those many perspectives. And Michael, I'm really glad that you came tonight. Michael Kimmel was one of the featured interviews on the feminist side of the spectrum on gender issues.
I wish more feminists had come out, because it could have been a good discussion. Like, it can be a good discussion, but I kind of feel bad that.
Can we give Mr. Kimmel a hand?
Yeah. I know personally how it feels to be in a panel where I'm grossly outnumbered, or my point of view might be grossly outnumbered, or I feel like I'm outnumbered, and so yeah. No, I'm glad you're here, but I wish there were more feminists who had chosen to come on.
I don't know, I mean, this is the premiere, I don't really know if there was kind of an invitation out there. I don't know. But look, I mean, I come to this in the same way, in the same spirit that someone like Warren Farrell did. I came out of just as he did in the mid-1970s, I came out of men's groups that were inspired by women's consciousness raising groups, and part of the men's liberation idea, which part of that is part of the heart, it seems to me, of the of what the men's rights movement is about, is that patriarchy sucks for everybody. It sucks for men. And all of that stuff about men, being disposable, the stuff about some of the father rights complaints, that has always resonated for me. Of course that's true. It took a turn, the men's liberation part, to my mind, took a turn, or now exists in parallel with and it's women's fault. It's women who are the blame here. When it was a conversation about, hold on.
Everything is mirrored.
Let me just say this. My argument is that there's a split between those who believe that patriarchy sucks for men and men need liberation too, and all of the stuff that was in the beginning of the movie, all the stuff about that Warren was saying, for example, about being constrained, about not being able to show your feelings, the fact that the court system is systematically biased against divorced dads in custody. There's no question about it. But on the other hand, who's to blame for this? Right? That's the place where I feel that the movement divides.
I'd like to answer that.
I'm posing as a result.
Organizations that lobby against.
I'm posing as a question.
They are the ones who kill joint custody.
I'd like to answer part of that too, honestly.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Look, I'm saying from where I sit that I'm here and I agreed to participate in the film and agreed to participate in this because I think that men get a raw deal too. I do think that that it sucks, and that part of the constraints on men do in fact injure us and cause all of the kinds of things that people talk about. I get that part, and I completely support it. And so, as I said in the movie, if you're looking around for people who are unhappy with how gender roles have developed, there's a group out there that's been doing it. I heard nothing in this that wasn't in the ERA. There should be no discrimination based on sex. Period. Full stop.
If you're saying
We would agree
society
with that.
sucks for men, then we need a men's rights movement.
Okay, but I just wanna say one thing,
And
because
what do we need?
you say we don't need a men's movement that blames women or what. Well, when it comes to a custody battle, okay, there is a woman who is seeking sole custody and seeking to deny the father access, custody, visitation, whatever, rights to his child. There is a woman there who is to blame. There is not a single woman on this planet who is forced to request sole custody, who is forced, okay, by a court, by a system, okay, to deny access to the child's father, right? That woman is responsible. And this is what Alison and I talk about all the time, is absolving women of responsibility for when they are bad actors.
I think we're missing something here, and I'm going to go ahead and speak up to it. I appreciate what you said, Michael. I really do. But as was gone over in this movie, the men who kill themselves over custody disputes, the men who are despondent who end up living in cars. Oh yes, getting a raw deal. I also remember very clearly reading on the website of the American Men's Studies Association, a feminist group, and the National Organization of Men Against Sexism, NOMAS, describing fathers' rights groups as abusers' lobbies whose only purpose for wanting close to their children was so that they could continue to abuse them and abuse their wives. I'm sorry, Mr. Kimball, if you have compassion for the struggles of men, then you need to do a lot better job about cleaning up your own house.
Yeah.
It's not my house, but I take your point. I completely share your point.
I would just make one little quick point,
And I-
that what if women are their own worst enemies also? What if the parallel to patriarchy is the sisterhood, and what if that's what's controlling women? And what if women are their own worst enemies, as it were?
What if it's
just like
all
men?
intrasexual competition that's, you know, it's
Well, I actually
men
have
pick
a
other men
question.
under the bus
I
to
have-
impress women, and women call each other sluts because that's a way to take their females down a peg.
Michael,
Right.
I need to ask you a question. Are you denying that feminist organizations are the chief lobbyers against
No.
custody?
No, and
So
and
how-
so my most recent book is called Angry White Men, and there's a chapter on the men's rights movement, and there's a chapter on the father rights movement, and a lot of my feminist friends have given me a lot of shit because in the father rights movement chapter I say these guys have a point,
Yeah, I know, that'll get you.
and I do not deny that, Fred. I do not. I think
And
that
then
is
how do you
important.
explain that? If you're telling us that,
No.
that we should work with feminists to say all they want is equality, how do you explain their staunch opposition to one of the most fundamental men's rights equality issues?
Go for it, Mark.
I think feminism isn't a they, a singular group. There's a lot of differentiating different perspectives in feminism. A lot of what this movie went over resonated with me. I've been through custody battles myself. I'm very sympathetic to the limitations that gender places on men. On the other hand, I, like Warren Farrell, was around. I've been around. Well, many of you are my age or older. You've seen the harm that sexism did to women, and it was doing it to men as well. But we didn't have a legal system that was structured fairly. We didn't. Women didn't have equal rights. So you're probably
with you because
wait a second.
I am of that era.
Wait a second.
And I was there in the 60s and 70s.
Well,
when they were saying that men can do anything they want. This is when
No,
it was
that's-
born.
but-
And this is when I was dealing with, because you have a penis, you have no choice but to go to Vietnam and fight
Yes,
for your life.
exactly.
I
right.
hear you with that.
Exactly
But
right.
see, if we're talking about legal equality, that's not legal equality
Yes.
either.
That's
So
totally
I
Men are forced to go to
let,
war.
Yeah. Just a moment.
That's the law.
I know. I'm in a crowd where I don't get to say much, I think. But what I'm
We're
trying to
waiting.
say,
Go ahead.
let me finish, please. What I guess I'm trying to say is I am highly critical of the limitations that gender places on men, and I've got a big problem with that. I've always had a problem with the limitations gender places on women. I don't think we need to set a scale and say they're equal. We need to say that they're problems. It's impossible. They're different issues, honestly. If you think about it, they're different issues. So you can't say each one has an equal and opposing opposite. It's not a contest to see who has it worse. You just said it's equal. It doesn't matter if it's equal or not. We need to be critical of the way gender limits men. We need to be critical of the way gender limits women. And it's not a contest. And here's the thing. I've been a lifelong feminist. I'm critical of these issues. And I think of feminism as a big tent. I don't agree with everything feminists do. Some of the things that feminists do offend me. I bet it offends you too when people on the same side of an issue that you're on say something ridiculous. Okay?
Only when one of them gets a law passed.
That's it's offensive or makes factually untrue claims. It's frustrating all around. I'm a social scientist, and my goal is to see everything as objective as possible. I guess my point is, it's not a contest, and I think feminism can be a big tent. I think many feminists, and I personally think that it's one of the key components of the feminist endeavor to look critically at the limitations gender places on men. I've been arguing with feminists for a long time about this. Many agree, some disagree. that it's important to look critically at the limitations of gender
Most
places
of
on
us
men.
are a
Let me
little
ask
more
you something.
concerned.
Who are the people
I
under
don't
your
see the
big tent?
demonizing of feminism, I guess. That's the
Who are
thing.
the people
I-
under your
I-
big
I am-
tent
I am
that
more
speak out
concerned
against the laws
with
that
the
feminists
laws
are
that
passing?
make men
I don't
cry
agree
than
with
I
that.
am with their
But who are the
inability
people
to cry.
speaking out about it?
Exactly. Sorry.
I would like to
I
pay
mean,
Cassie
I'm
a
speaking out against it.
a
Okay,
compliment.
Yeah, I'm
enough.
speaking out against the limits that, you know, the laws that are.
We need a moderator.
Cassie,
Yeah,
Cassie, I think it's time for
loud
someone to say, I'm gonna say it. It was a well-made film, and the time and effort that you invested in the one point that I wanted to point out as a highlight that impressed me very strongly was the Boko Haram segment, where you very dramatically, and of this compliment, by the way, extends to the entire team working on this film. My hat's off to all of you, where you very dramatically demonstrate how we are trained to be blind, or we're choosing to be blind. We're helped along
that
in our
was a very good
blindness
point.
to certain issues, and seeing other ways. I would also like to add something from my own perspective, which I invite you to consider as we move forward with the activism and promoting the film. I have found that sometimes very well-intentioned, heartfelt, sincerely interested people literally cannot see. And I see an analogy to what has happened, or what happened, I've read it twice, among the Spanish conquistadores when they came to the New World in the Caribbean. Some of the Caribbean islanders said, "Where did you come from, this strange man wearing a strange outfit on the beach?" "Oh, well, we came here in those galleons out in the bay." They would look, they literally could not see it, which to my mind is bizarre because, okay, you've never seen a galleon before, but it is a man-made object that displaces water and transports a human being from one place to another. Isn't there an analogous thing? I think that some of us have been so trained that when we see the boys being hurt, literally, the mind cannot comprehend that.
I don't think it's all training though. It's not all training. It's also, it's part of our biological wetware.
I would have, well put.
I'd like-
I'm gonna raise. I would say this is very
In the effort of getting through a lot of questions, let's go to.
I'd like to hear about the youth issue. I noticed there weren't that many young people. I've been leading a men's group for 22 years out in the Northwest. I grew up here in the city. We also have a women's group and a youth group, and they work on different things, but in a coordinated way. And part of our effort is to reach young people, because boys, since this is the issue, are shamed in ways that some of you have indicated. But I'd love to hear more about how do we reach the young. This is much more than a middle-aged,
How do we do it, or
my
how do
parents
we
were
do it
divorced
without-
and had a very ugly custody fight, so I'm there in terms of how important that is, really there. But yeah, reaching the
how do
young,
we do it, or
young
how do we
boys
do
who
it
don't know
without
who
being
they
assumed
are,
to be
how to relate to
pedophiles?
girls. I'd love your comments on that.
Boys right now, at least in, not post-secondary, but primary and secondary school, they are in need of help. They're not necessarily in need of being recruited into activism. They actually just need help and support. And there are lots on universities that are starting, right, men's groups and equality groups that are focused on men's issues, and that's starting to happen. I think a lot of their wake-up call was the 2012, was it 2012 Warren Farrell protest, at least in Canada. A lot of them, that video went viral online. A lot of young men were just like, what the hell is up with this? There was one very poignant, interview with a young man whose two friends had committed suicide, and he was hoping to get some closure on that. And a feminist was interviewed, and the interviewer said, "Well, this is why this young man is here." And she says, "Well, why this way? Why here? There are plenty of spaces in feminism to deal with mental health issues for women, men, and people who don't identify with the binary." So it's essentially, okay, you have permission to deal with your issues as long as you do it our way and look at it through our lens. And that is starting to change. We're starting to see young men stand up, and some of those young men are going to say, fuck it, and go their own way. They're just going to do that. They're going to say, I'm ditching, the system's broken, I'm leaving. Right? The roller coaster's broken. I'm not getting on it. Right? The MRAs are saying the roller coaster's broken. I'm not getting on it until it's fixed.
But don't they actually believe the lie, though? Don't they actually believe that, they're the problem? that they're the violent
Make-
ones, they're the problem. Young
Oh,
young
a lot of
boys.
young men do.
They
right?
get propagandized and they believe it.
Yes.
And
That's
then they don't know
kind
how
of
to
what I
relate
was
to girls,
talking
am I
about.
right? And girls don't know how to relate to them.
That's kind of where I was going to take that question, because you're asking how can we help boys?
Yeah.
And one of the things we need to answer is how can we stop hurting boys? Because like it wasn't that long ago that the African American community made it very clear with the Black is Beautiful movement that if you're growing up in an environment where you're told you're not, that it's very damaging. And now we've raised a few generations of boys who are told that male is not ugly maybe, but male is stupid, male is abusive, male is
Look at the
incompetent.
advertising on
And
TV.
It's in the advertising,
It's all
it's in the news
stupid
coverage,
men.
it's in the curriculum, it's in the entertainment.
Yeah.
And we need to stop that.
Seriously.
Okay, just because we're limited on time, sorry, did you want to say?
I wanted to say that this is a place again where I think as a very proud feminist, I agree with this critique thread. There's another movie that one should see in parallel with this that I think is made by a feminist woman that is very compassionate to what happens to boys. It's called The Mask You Live In. It's by Jennifer Siebel Newsom. She's the wife
Feminist
of the Lieutenant Governor.
Feminist film.
of California.
It's a feminist film.
The Mask You Live In.
Yeah, it's a feminist film.
It is
and
a
it's
feminist
I just said that. And it is extremely compassionate to what
No, it's not.
happens to the damage
No,
that
it's
happens
not.
to
It's all about
boys.
that
I think it is.
It's more
Here,
anti-male
let me
propaganda.
let me
I've
ask-
seen it.
propaganda.
Let me ask you a
I think
question.
it's gorgeous.
Let me ask you a question because
How many people in this room have
okay,
seen
yes.
Mr. Kimmel, I think everyone here would say that there is no one to blame for the system, but we need to come together as men and women to fix what we see as a problem. You asked us who we blame. I ask you who you blame.
Well, there you go.
Who do you blame for the system?
Well, I think that the system has many, many components, many people. I blame white people for this system. Oh, really? Oh, really?
The system makes
Start talking to me about white privilege, buddy, because I'm not listening to it.
White people,
I'm not gonna
we are
listen
the
to it.
beneficiaries of the greatest affirmative action program in world history. It's called world history.
Tell me about
It's not
white
worth it.
privilege.
Come on.
Every culture,
Bunch of
White-
shit.
Racial issue.
every culture that
I'm
has ever
saying-
become a civilization has been based on a patriarchal model up until very recently, right? This is how all large human systems work. Patriarchy is an emergent property of gender roles within certain environments, and that is just how things work. What you would call patriarchy, the rule of the father, paternus, familias, blah, 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 all of that stuff. Okay, but what I want to ask of you about this movie that you said was so compassionate to boys. Okay, now, the term toxic masculinity.
Have you
Okay, no. I'm just going to ask you about the term toxic masculinity. Now, every time I bring up with a feminist that this is an issue, that this term is bandied about like it's just nothing. It's just confetti. Okay? Now, they tell me, well, if you knew what it really meant, okay, if you just take a women's studies class and you learn what it actually, it's not actually saying all but an 8-year-old boy hasn't taken a women's studies class. An 8-year-old boy doesn't have the mental chops to wrap his brain around the pretzelized logic that it takes feminists to come up with terms like toxic masculinity and then say they're an expression of kindness towards men, okay? So I'm just gonna ask you, maybe we shouldn't be using terms like that to describe
Hello?
classes of people.
It's the only time masculinity is used, by the way, is with the word toxic and hetero. Otherwise,
That's
it's
not
macho.
true. That's not
It's
true.
macho all the
That's
time.
How about toxic
The phrase
academics?
toxic masculinity is used as a contrast, I think, to what's also called healthy masculinity.
I agree.
Which is
Well, what is toxic femininity?
environmental
Well, I know what toxic
stewardship.
femininity
Sorry to cut this party short, but let's do this on the sidewalk. Everyone bring out your phones.
Okay.
All right.
And then
Thanks for coming.
or it doesn't matter.
Can we exit?
Oh, I see.
I love your
I had to go because I have an actual son.
for a long time. See what happens.
Hanging out with him.
Absolutely.
Is that you, Kathy?
All right. Yes, Michael. It's already 10 minutes late. Yeah, show.